All right, and we're on. Introducing Max Corbridge, founder at Secure Agentics. How are you, mate?
Very well, thanks. Very well. Thanks for having me on, Joe.
Yeah, no worries, my man. No worries. I know you've been sort of jet setting recently, last
I
week and so
have,
on.
yeah, far
Yeah.
too much for my liking, to be honest. From US and then straight to Helsinki and back to back. But yeah, found life. Got to try and make things happen. It's not going to happen sitting in your bedroom. So
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Well, I think what will be a good start is for us to really just dive into a little bit about your background and how you got into the security industry. I know today we're going to be discussing your current business and what you're building, but also more importantly, the recent Anthropic report that came out. But yeah, a quick segue into it might be a quick
yeah,
background into yourself and
yeah.
how we've got here.
So I had you probably hear this quite a bit. I had quite an unconventional route in to security. I had a very non-technical background originally. I studied French and Spanish actually at university and was going to join the army. Didn't know exactly what I was going to do. Then ended up saying no, I'm not going to join the army. And then around that time, one of my mates was telling me that there's this job where you can get paid to hack into banks. I was thinking, wow, that sounds pretty exciting. And so I ended up kind of doing a little bit of what we call capture the flags, which is where you try and practice your way around hacking into machines. Found I really enjoyed it. I was already obsessed with escape rooms, and it was like an escape room on a computer. So I was like, this sounds great. And then locked myself in my room for 6 months, teaching myself everything I needed to learn to get a job at a UK London-based consultancy, and then did that for the last 7 years now, up until I've now moved on to founding my own thing.
Yeah, love that, mate. Well, really impressive background considering such a young age. So I'm looking forward to seeing the success you have. I guess what I'm curious about is what made you make that decision to think now was the time to launch your own startup.
So I've been wanting to do my own thing for a long time. Basically, I was actually quite lucky. Everywhere that I've worked, I've worked at relatively boutique places, as you kind of expect in cyber when you're trying to get cut your teeth on new challenges and work at a fast pace. And I'd always worked alongside the founders of the business, and so I had a chance to speak to them about their founding journey. And so I'd always wanted to do that ever since my first role. And then it was a case of when's the right time and what's the right thing to do. I was getting more and more serious about it in the last kind of year or two. And then that's when I really discovered, and it's going to sound cliche, but that's when I really discovered AI agents. And I was like, wow, that is an area which I think needs a lot of security people focusing on how to solve that problem. And so I said, that's a good area. That was a good time. I'm early enough to this industry to really help kind of shape it and really be there from day one, from when agents first kind of came about to actually they're starting now to be adopted more at enterprise, to where we go next and how do we do it the right way. That's really the kind of the journey that I'm on.
Yeah, brilliant. I think what's interesting is AI isn't a new thing, and I know it sort of went mainstream when the chat GBTs and etc.
Mhm.
became sort of public use. But how, I guess, sort of how long has it been a problem, I guess, is maybe the
I mean, you could argue it's still not. I mean, it's really interesting because there's sort of, and this is kind of goes hand in hand with like an AI security company, and actually the fact that fundraising and also trying to find customers is a very interesting dynamic of like, are we late to the sort of AI security problem, or are we early? Is like AI security already like an alive and well problem, or are we only really at the beginning? I think we're sort of right at the start of it. Especially with sort of AI agents and agentic AI adoption, I think at the enterprise level has been slightly slower than people expected. Perhaps, I mean, it's an untrusted technology, so you can see why. But I think that the last year or two, people have really started to get their head around Gen AI security and how that's a problem and how we need to be doing more. But I think agentic AI is really starting to find its feet now in the enterprise, and also therefore the problem pains that people are feeling at the enterprise are starting to show themselves now more and more. I think if you look to throw yourself back a couple of years, if you were launching then, which there are several people were, trying to solve enterprise AI security risks almost before enterprises were really adopting it, the mainstream is challenging. Versus now, it feels a lot more like there's a pull from people saying, okay, we've got this problem, we've got agents, we've got MCP servers that we're unsure about, and it really, it's all sort of aligning up. I would say really starting to sort of take off this year, next year, I think
Yeah.
we'll see a big change.
Yeah, I think this leads quite nicely into the Anthropic report, actually, because the title is something along the lines of first AI
Yeah,
orchestrated cyber espionage
yeah.
attack. Um, and that was sort of lead why they thought, okay, so they've worded that quite cleverly that it's the first reported. I guess what actually happened, Max, in that instance, and we can talk a little bit more about the takeaways from it. But what actually happened for the audience there?
Yeah, so it was another one of those events. We have them. It feels like every couple of weeks in AI and in cyber, where something big happens and everything looks a little bit different afterwards. This was a nation state hacking group from China that targeted a number of organizations, about 30 organizations, and they were financial institutions, energy companies, as well as like central government agencies in the US. And they targeted them, which is nothing new. But the thing that was new is that it was 80 to 90% driven by AI. Now, those sorts of attack happen 24/7, but this is really the first time we've seen a nation state lean into using AI, and not just using it a bit to help improve accuracy and improve efficiency somewhat. It was in the driving seat. And then really, when you look at the report, if we're taking everything in there to be, exactly what happened, then you're looking at, humans now serving the purpose of being sort of overseers and approving certain actions and fact checking here and there, but largely AI being the one that was actually executing the campaign. And that has massive, I think, repercussions for where we are as an industry, or what the usage of AI is, and the sort of follow-on effects after that.
At that point alone, just the 80 to 90% of the attack being orchestrated by AI is like obviously
Mm.
extremely alarming. Um, how close are we to potentially either it being 100% possible? Is that could it be 100% at any point or
You know what's funny is I've been wrong about how advanced AI hacking is already in the past, and that was only 6 months ago. So I'm not going to try and make a claim that I know will probably be false within another 6 months' time. The thing which I think is crazy when you're looking at the pace of this is really that it, you know coming from my background, where you're working in offensive security and there are tools which help you become more efficient. What they did is the creme de la creme. It's the end goal. It's an end-to-end sophisticated attack against a hardened nation state level target, right? On the other end of the spectrum is doing things like a web application security test, or a pen test as we call it. Now, that side of things is a lot lower. It's a lot more one-dimensional. It's a lot lower barrier to entry. It's a lot more, easy, to put it for lack of a better word, when you're not targeting a hardened environment X, Y, Z. Now, what we saw maybe a year or so ago, actually probably less, was AI had started to really make some movements in that space, in the web hacking side of things, and we saw an AI agent called Expo, which was at the time the main one that people were talking about, which had started not only having success in the web application side of things, but it also started to, top some of the leaderboards and activity and bugs submitted, etc., etc. And so that was that first sort of leap forward, where we were like, okay, AI is good, but it's not going to be real world, or it's not going to work in an actual environment, to actually know we can use it and it is useful, and it is finding vulnerabilities in applications that have been tested for several years. And that was that first sort of leap forward. And I remember texting my friend at the time, who works in red teaming, which was my background, and I was leading a red team, and he was now leading that red team in my stead. And I remember texting him, showing him what had happened, and the Expo was on the loose, and that it was starting to make some waves in the web application space. But we said, oh, don't worry, red teaming, that side of things, we're safe for a few more years. And then this comes out literally 6 months later, saying that actually now we've got nation states doing sort of full end-to-end advanced simulation. Well, not even simulation, because I'm used to saying simulation from our
yeah.
side, from the red teaming side, but from them, it's a real sophisticated attack, almost entirely with AI. So if I were to say no, we'd still need another a couple of years before we get to the 100%? I don't know at this stage. It could be another 6 months, honestly, and it could be a lot longer.
What parts of that like particular kill chain were actually not AI generated then? And if you think about that, you think,
Yeah.
oh, actually, in 6 months, a year, it could potentially.
So there was a few things, interestingly, that were the humans did, and it wasn't really the grunt work. The humans did a lot of the approval, a lot of the sort of highest level decision making, as well as sort of stepping in to course correct. Now, one of the things which is interesting, which came out, now the way that Anthropic have played this from a marketing side is definitely interesting, because it was using their technology, which they then use to target these. So it looks bad because they've jailbroken it, but then also the nation states are using their agents, not anybody else's. One of the things which they also mentioned in their report is that the attackers would have been more successful, but actually the agent was hallucinating quite a lot of the time, and so they had to go in. The humans had to go in and be like, "Have you actually done this?" And actually, it made up answers to certain things, and it also pretended that it had compromised certain things when actually it hadn't. So it was really a sort of reviewer role. But the large portions of the kill chain, so reconnaissance and exploitation, and I won't get into the details of the actual exploitation chain, but they did use things like server-side request forgery to gain initial access, and then for lateral movement and persistence. All of that was done via the agent. Now, I do think that it's something worth calling out that this is not at the stage where anyone off the street would be able to go and do this. In my view, I still think you need someone who has technical understanding. They are operators themselves. They know what good looks like. They know what a false positive looks like. They know what something which looks a bit out of place would look like. Absolutely, I think that sort of person now, with the commercially available tools, is able to do something like this. But I don't think that means that absolutely anyone could, or that, for that matter, that we should be worried about this becoming completely automated in the short term. But it does definitely change the barrier to entry, and it definitely takes us a few steps closer to that than we thought.
Absolutely. Well, I'm hoping Anthropic have put up some security guardrails in the meantime.
Yeah,
On
I
that,
mean, it's really because I don't know if you saw the what they actually did, right? If the attackers, so to rewind a second, Anthropic and all of these AI providers for many years have been telling us that their models are very secure and that they've been trained rigorously to avoid doing harmful things. Now, in the AI security space, we've known for that whole time that, despite saying that, things like prompt injection are a problem without a fixed solution. There is no solution to prompt injection. That's just based off the way that natural language processing works. Conversation for another day. However, what this really shows is that despite all the talk around this, these models can be misaligned. And actually, the way that it was misaligned was not using some form of very advanced jailbreak technique that was doing some sort of crazy technical way of jailbreaking this and misaligning it. What they actually did was, ironically, the exact same thing I do, which is true in my case. They just role played that they were a cybersecurity defensive team, and that's it. And that's all that they needed to do. Now, that is a jailbreak, which I have been using for years. And I know that it works because it's the one I've been doing with legitimate purposes.
yeah,
And I know that it works. Sometimes you need to give it a little bit of a nudge and sort of coerce it and say, no, I really do have permission or whatever. But this was not anything fancy. This was using commercially available tools. It was using the latest and greatest Claude code version and product. It was not using some form of specially trained attacking AI system. It was just using a generic AI system with a generic setup with agents talking to MCP servers and vice versa, and then a very basic jailbreak that we have been using in the industry for a while. It sets a precedent.
Yeah. I think what's also really interesting is that the hallucination of the agent was causing them problems and didn't mean that the attack was a successful or
Yeah.
meant that it stalled it. See,
I mean, how would you approach the marketing side of things for this? So you've got the fact that you've got nation states using your agent, which is great because you're like, well, at least they're using our agent and not anyone
yeah,
else's agent. But then you've also got the fact that they were jailbreaking it using pretty basic jailbreaks. So it's not, that's, that side of things isn't great. And then you've also got to admit that it was hallucinating, which you say it shouldn't do. And you're like, okay, how do we turn this into a win? I think it's really interesting the way that they actually approached it as well, was very much saying like, we disrupted this. It wasn't the fact that they were using Claude code. That wasn't the problem. The great thing is that we disrupted it. But you can imagine, the head honchos at Anthropic having a real sit down, like, how do we approach the messaging on this?
Well, they are hiring the Anthropic security team, I noticed, prior
Okay.
to this interview. So if anyone's listening and wants a job there, they are hiring for security professionals. What other
Sounds like they could do with
takeaways
a few more.
Exactly. What other takeaways did you pick up, Max, from the report specifically?
So I'd say that the key ones in my view were that, as I kind of mentioned, AI powered hacking, I should say, is moving a lot quicker than we anticipated. It feels like we went from that Expo story, and this was sort of in the future and theoretical, to all of a sudden it's here and now, and nation states are using it with success against government agencies. Like, that is a huge leap in a very short period of time, and I think it sets the precedent for where we're headed. So I think this is a sort of a turning point where now, if you're another nation state hacker and you're looking at this report, you're thinking, oh, are we using AI? I mean, we should be. This allows us to move quicker. It allows us to do more, as does to have less people on the ground, etc., etc. So that's number one. Number two is, I would say that the barrier to entry for this has dropped enormously. You go from needing a team of people to who have experience in doing this, and this is what my whole world was prior to doing what I'm doing now, was nation state level attack simulation, and it's a really hard thing, and it takes a long time. And we would never do one of those projects alone. You'd do them with 2 or 3 people, right? And so if you're going to think about a nation state level or even organized cybercrime, you're going to need a number of people with, let's say, a decade of experience to be able to pull something like this off. Now we've got frontier products, basic jailbreaks, and maybe one person who can orchestrate. That's a very different barrier to entry. And really, if you learned how to orchestrate, optimizing for that over anything else, then there's any number of things that you could sort of do with that. I think as well, another one of the takeaways is, which they call out in the report, is that the speed has changed quite dramatically. There's this concept in the defensive world of median time to detect and median time to respond, or mean time to detect and mean time to respond. Essentially, how long does it take for an event to happen in our environment before we're able to see and react to it? Now, blue teams have been used to a certain precedent, which is what basically all defensive tooling has been built off, and the sort of the bar that we've been working towards for the last several decades. But when you've got AI powered breaches, they don't need so much time to think and process, because they can do so either simultaneously or in very rapid succession. And actually, that's one of the ways that Anthropic could confirm that they had done AI powered hacking as opposed to human, was they were seeing the pace at which things were happening was just not a human level of operation. And so what that means as well for the blue team people on their side of the fence is that now, if you're dealing against dealing with these attacks, that you've actually got to be moving a lot quicker, as well, in terms of how you can respond to this. So yeah, there's I mean, those are 3, but
Yeah.
there are several more. I think this is a really sort of a momentous turning point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I would like to sort of highlight is that your newsletter that you pushed out a week or so ago, I'll put it in the show notes. There's a lot of
Thank you.
interesting stuff that you've mentioned on that. So I'll put that in the show notes. I think what does the outlook now look like moving forward? Because obviously the reports come out, the news sort of went viral, LinkedIn, etc., etc. What's the next step, and like what does the future now look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to predict anything AI future, as I've already proven with things like my expectations of how long it would take us to get to this point. Um, I think that one of the takeaways in terms of looking forward is that if we're having AI powered attack, we're going to need AI powered defense. Coming back to that speed point, if it's kind of like you need to fight fire with fire to some degree, in order to sort of keep up. I would also say one of the other sort of key takeaways is that the role of AI agents is going to increasingly be seen within this
Yeah.
attacking landscape. I mean, this is the first attempt, right? And it was pretty impactful, pretty successful,
First
and
reported.
yeah, first reported. You're correct. And so I think we're expecting to see a lot more of this on the horizon, in
Yeah.
terms of where we go from here. I think that we can expect to see a good deal more agent powered breaches, as well as leveraging these. Let me think if there's one more.
What might tie in quite nicely is what are you up to at Secure Agentics, and how is that now going to solve a big problem?
Yeah, so this actually, this report fed almost directly back into the product in some ways, that we're building. So what we're building is a monitoring and control toolkit, which will allow you to basically monitor what your AI agents are doing and ensuring they're, for lack of a better word, not misbehaving. And the way that we're doing that is by combining some of traditional approaches to monitoring with some of the newer cutting edge ways of monitoring, and also optimizing for where we're seeing people use AI agents the most right now, which is in the sort of developer space and with agentic coding tools and things like that. And really making sure that when you're an organization that's adopting AI, and when you're allowing your developers and your staff to use AI agents, that there is some sort of control plane there to say, are these agents doing what they should be doing? Are we on top of what's actually happening and monitoring the activity that's going on? And can we put basic system guardrails and blocks and policies in place to say, actually, we don't want our agents to be used in a malicious way?
Yeah, I love that, because I think a lot of businesses are just sort of thinking, let's get something which means that we can approve the use of AI tools. They're not then thinking around the AI tool use and what's happening then within that. So
Yeah.
very exciting time for Max, and I wish you all the best of success for the future. I know that you have a really successful newsletter and publish a lot of your content. How can people get in touch with you if they're interested?
Yeah, sure. So the newsletter is at Max Corbridge, which is CEO. You can see it in the bottom, COR Bridge, .substack.com. I've got weekly posts on there. I'd follow everything in the AI security space as and when it happens. So that's a good place to sort of stay up to date with what's happening and the latest stuff. It's nothing to do with the business. It's just up there for for people who follow and want to track what's happening in the space. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. So if you just search my name there, then you'll find me. I post on there all the time. And then if anyone wants to get in touch directly, it's just my first name dot my last name at secureagentics.ai.
Love it. Like I say, Max, all the best of success for the future, my man, and I'll
Thank
be
you so
I'll be
much,
right
Joe.
by your side. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.